On July 11, 1943, at 200 hours over the Mediterranean Sea near Sicily's southern coast, Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Tucker clutched the open doorway frame of his C-47 transport as a barrage of fire illuminated the night sky. Tracer rounds ascended like lethal fireworks, and 40 enemy shells exploded in the darkness with fiery bursts. Every Allied vessel below unleashed their guns at Tucker's aircraft, and those carrying his men from the 144 C-47s of the 54th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The formation had left Tunisia without encountering any issues, maintaining a disciplined formation throughout the journey. The paratroopers were seated on their benches, laden with equipment, weapons, and ammunition. They had practiced this jump countless times and knew their objectives: secure the beachhead, protect the landing zones, and rendezvous with incoming forces at dawn. This should have been a standard combat drop. However, everything changed when the first shells struck. The radio operator in the lead plane shrieked through his microphone, pleading desperately for an end to the barrage. "We are American paratroopers," he shouted repeatedly. "Stop firing! Stop firing!" The transmission was sent on the designated frequency, but coordination among various services fell short. Consequently, most ships were unaware of the operation. Below deck, the gunners had no clue that friendly aircraft were closing in. They only knew that German bombers had struck just 15 minutes prior. Spotting silhouettes against the sky, they opened fire immediately. Other aircraft, hit by multiple shells, caught fire and struggled to stay aloft. Pilots wrestled with their controls as engines faltered and wings tore apart. Some attempted to reach the shore while others tried making emergency landings in the Mediterranean Sea. Few succeeded. Inside the damaged planes, paratroopers faced dire choices: jump into the dark sea carrying heavy equipment likely leading to drowning, or remain aboard the burning aircraft destined for a fatal crash. Despite the perilous situation, some chose to parachute anyway, splashing into the water fully geared up. The weight of their gear pulled them under swiftly. A few managed to jettison their equipment and swim free, however. Most did not resurface. Others leaped onto land only to plunge into a horrific ordeal. Allied anti-aircraft batteries on the beaches locked onto them as they drifted down from the sky. Another 37 sustained such severe damage that they would never see combat again. A total of 81 men lost their lives immediately. An additional 18 were wounded. Among the fatalities was Brigadier General Charles Kieran's assistant division commander, who died when his transport plane was hit. The grim reality of friendly fire took its toll on senior leadership. Tucker managed to survive that night. His aircraft navigated through the barrage of gunfire. He landed with his remaining men and fought throughout the night to achieve their objectives. But as dawn broke over Sicily's blood-stained sands, he witnessed rescue boats pulling bodies from the Mediterranean, medics tending to the wounded, and dog tags being collected from the fallen soldiers. In that moment, Tucker silently vowed this would never happen again, not under his command, never to any American soldier. Unbeknownst to Tucker and everyone else at the time, this devastating night would set in motion the creation of one of the most successful aircraft identification systems in military history. So recognizable that gunners could spot it within seconds. The overhaul didn't rely on intricate radar systems or advanced electronics, but rather on basic tools: paintbrushes, black paint, white paint, and an unwavering commitment to prevent American forces from mistakenly targeting each other. The problem had been escalating for months. By early 1943, Allied strategists were aware that the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe would necessitate unprecedented air superiority. Thousands of aircraft would be in the skies simultaneously: fighters, bombers, transports, gliders, reconnaissance planes, all operating within the same airspace and vulnerable to the same tragic errors. The current identification system seemed sufficient on paper. American planes bore white stars against blue circles, while British aircraft sported red, white, and blue roundels. These markers had functioned adequately in smaller-scale operations involving just dozens of planes, but Operation Overlord would involve thousands. The technology intended to prevent friendly fire was known as Identification Friend or Foe IFF. This electronic system utilized radio transponders that responded to ground interrogations with friendly signals. In theory, every Allied aircraft would electronically identify itself to each anti-aircraft battery and fighter pilot. However, in reality, the system faced significant limitations. Lieutenant Commander William McGarry of the United States Navy understood these constraints better than most. In January 1943, he took command of the USS Jeffers, a destroyer escort tasked with safeguarding the invasion fleet heading towards Sicily. Prior to this assignment, Captain McGarry had insisted that his crew undergo specialized training in aircraft recognition. The Navy set up a dedicated school in Columbus, Ohio for this purpose. Known as the Renshaw course, it utilized cutting-edge methods to teach gunners how to quickly identify aircraft silhouettes. Onan Donald McClure, who was 25 years old at the time, completed his training at the Renshaw School early in 1943. This rigorous training proved invaluable. On the night of July 11, 1943, when C-47 transport planes appeared over the invasion fleet, many ships opened fire immediately. However, the USS Jeffers did not respond aggressively because its crew had been trained to recognize aircraft silhouettes accurately. Despite the chaotic and dark conditions, as well as recent German bomber attacks, the Jeffers managed to avoid firing on American paratroopers that night. Unfortunately, this was an exception rather than a rule. Most ships had not received the same intensive training, and their crews were operating under extreme stress after days of combat. Just 15 minutes before the C-47s arrived, German Ju-88 bombers attacked the fleet. With their twin-engine configuration similar to that of the C-47s, distinguishing between friendly and enemy aircraft in darkness was nearly impossible. The U.S. Army's official history described the scene with stark clarity. The slow-moving columns of aircraft were vulnerable targets. Was struck, clarets of transport planes were struck. One detonated mid-flight. Others on fire attempted to crash land in the ocean to safeguard the paratroopers aboard. Squadrons disintegrated, briefly regrouped, and then dispersed once more. 8 pilots turned back toward Tunisia, with their troops still on board, unable to navigate through the intense barrage of gunfire. Major General Matthew Ridgway, who commanded the 82nd Airborne Division, observed the unfolding catastrophe from a vessel near Sicily's coast. He had voiced his apprehensions about the mission prior to its commencement. Naval leaders informed him they could not ensure the security of his aircraft, explicitly stating, "Cannot guarantee safety." Despite assurances that all naval units would be notified about the overflying paratrooper planes, many ship captains later claimed they received no such instructions. The subsequent investigation revealed numerous oversights. Ground forces were inadequately warned about the impending airborne operation. Troops on land utilized distinct passwords from those employed by airborne personnel, causing confusion among soldiers who found themselves amidst friendly units after landing. The C-47s featured yellow recognition lights beneath their fuselages. However, gunners either missed them or misinterpreted their significance. Communication between different branches of the military had faltered at all levels. However, the core issue was more basic and enduring. Under extreme duress, humans cannot consistently identify aircraft by silhouette alone in darkness, or after being assaulted, especially when there is a high risk of death if they hesitate to act. Discipline breaks down regardless of training when bombs are raining from the sky and ships are sinking around them. Ridgway was aware of this. In his report from August 1943, he recognized the terrible loss of life, but also included a prediction that would later prove accurate. He believed that the lessons learned could not have been acquired through any other means and provided a solid foundation for preventing future occurrences. Within 4 days, German counterattacks threatened the beachhead. Lieutenant General Mark Clark, who commanded the invasion, urgently requested that the 82nd Airborne be sent as reinforcements. Clark met with naval and ground commanders face-to-face and sent representatives to ensure the order reached every single unit. The C-40 Sims flew a route that avoided crossing paths with the invasion fleet. When the 54th Regiment parachuted just before midnight on September 13, they encountered no hostile fire whatsoever. The success of this operation vindicated Ridgway's insistence on strict anti-aircraft controls and demonstrated that friendly fire could be prevented through precise communication and discipline. However, it required flawless coordination, impeccable timing, and meticulous execution. All lapse in the process would have resulted in casualties. A solution began to take shape, even though its importance went largely unnoticed at the time. Late in 1942, the Royal Air Force faced a unique identification challenge that initially appeared unrelated to the Sicily incident but would ultimately prove essential to resolving it. The Hawker Typhoon fighter had recently entered service as a low-altitude interceptor designed specifically to combat German hit-and-run attacks. It boasted impressive speed, reaching 41 Minute at low altitudes, and was armed with 420 Minute cannons. Its primary mission was to defend Britain's southern coast from the FW-190 fighter bombers. Unfortunately, its appearance bore a striking resemblance to the enemy aircraft when viewed from certain angles, leading to tragic instances of friendly fire. Allied anti-aircraft gunners mistakenly shot down numerous Typhoons during their early operational months, though exact figures were never officially recorded. Squadron logs documented several dozen such incidents. Pilots returning from combat missions over occupied France often found themselves under attack by their own defenses. Some managed to avoid being hit and survived, while others sustained injuries or lost their lives due to friendly fire on British soil. The visual similarity between the Typhoon and the FW-190 was more than superficial. Both aircraft featured large chin-mounted radiators for liquid-cooled engines, shared similar overall dimensions and wing configurations, and possessed inline engines with distinctive cowlings. This resemblance made identification particularly challenging at low altitudes where these planes typically operated. Both parties approached from the same direction, crossing the English Channel from occupied France. Given only a split second to decide whether to fire upon an approaching plane traveling at 450 s, any differences were nearly impossible to discern. Pilots expressed intense dissatisfaction over this issue. Meanwhile, ground gunners justified their actions by arguing that hesitation could allow a German bomber to reach its intended target. The RAF leadership acknowledged the problem but had difficulty finding effective solutions. Standard aircraft recognition training focused on silhouette identification, teaching gunners to distinguish between planes based on engine placement, wing design, and tail configuration. One of these was painting the entire nose of Typhoon aircraft white to create a distinctive marking visible from any angle. Although this measure helped somewhat, it did not fully resolve the issue as gunners continued to hesitate and pilots still faced danger. It wasn't until December 1942 that the RAF implemented a more effective solution. They added high-visibility black and white stripes under the Typhoon's wings, with each stripe measuring about 12 inches in width and stretching across the full wingspan. From a distance on the ground, this pattern was immediately recognizable. No German aircraft featured such markings, making it easier for gunners to identify friendly planes at a glance. This solution proved highly successful. Incidents involving friendly fire during Typhoons significantly decreased. This improvement did not go unnoticed by the RAF planning team, which documented the efficacy of wing stripes in their reports. These markings were seen as a potential model for future identification methods. However, in early 1943, there was no contemplation of applying such marking systems to thousands of aircraft simultaneously due to the sheer logistical challenges involved. Then came Sicily and Salerno. As Operation Overlord scale became apparent, Allied planners foresaw that on D-Day alone, over 14,000 aircraft sorties would be conducted above the invasion beaches. This included fighters providing air cover, medium bombers targeting coastal defenses, light bombers supporting ground forces, transport planes deploying paratroopers, gliders landing infantry, photo reconnaissance aircraft documenting the operation, and air-sea rescue planes ready to recover downed pilots. All these aircraft would operate in close proximity, with many flying at low altitudes within range of naval anti-aircraft fire. Meanwhile, the invasion fleet comprised thousands of vessels, numerous of which were armed with automatic weapons intended to engage any approaching aircraft. German aircraft would pose a constant threat to naval vessels, causing immense fatigue and fear among crew members. The circumstances would mirror those of Sicily, but amplified tenfold. In March 1944, a study group delved deeply into this issue. They determined the number of IFF interrogation signals that would be broadcast concurrently during the invasion. They also estimated how many aircraft could potentially engage each transmitter. Their analysis focused on whether the IFF system could manage numerous simultaneous responses effectively. The outcome was clear. The system would become overwhelmed and cease to function properly. Friendly fire incidents were not merely a possibility, they were certain to occur. Unless a new approach was devised, hundreds of planes would likely be shot down by Allied artillery during the invasion. Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Leigh-Mallory led the Allied Expeditionary Air Force and served as Supreme Air Commander for Operation Overlord. Every aircraft participating in the operation reported directly to him. Preventing another incident like Sicily rested squarely on his shoulders. Leigh-Mallory reviewed the study group's findings thoroughly, consulted with his staff, and examined the RAF's experience with Typhoon wing stripes. On May 17, 1944, just 2 weeks before D-Day, Leigh-Mallory sanctioned an innovative identification marking system that would significantly save lives. This directive mandated all Allied aircraft involved in Operation Overlord to be painted with a distinctive pattern, alternating black and white stripes. These markings were not limited to the wings, but extended to both wings and the fuselage, totaling 5 stripes, 3 white and 2 black. The specifications were meticulously detailed. Single-engine planes would feature stripes would have 24-inch wide stripes. The pattern was designed to be unmistakable. The stripes encircled the fuselage near the tail section and covered both top and bottom surfaces of the wings from front to back. This new identification system applied to a vast array of aircraft types, including fighters, light bombers, medium bombers, transports, gliders, reconnaissance planes, air-sea rescue aircraft, and even coastal command planes that might fly over the invasion fleet. However, 4-engine heavy bombers such as the B-7s and B-24s from the U.S. 8th Air Force and Lancasters of RAF Bomber Command were exempted due to their distinctive silhouettes, which made them easily recognizable as Allied aircraft. The Luftwaffe's use of 4-engine bombers like the Heinkel He-77 and Focke-Wulf Condor was extremely rare, making it safe for Allied gunners to assume any observed 4-engine bomber was friendly. The sheer magnitude of implementing this new marking system across various types of aircraft was immense. Numerous planes required repainting. Ground staff were already operating on an around-the-clock schedule to ready the aircraft for the impending invasion. Maintenance duties were in full swing, leaving no room for downtime. Now they faced the additional task of masking off roundels and serial numbers, mixing hundreds of gallons of paint, and applying distinctive stripes to thousands of planes, all without interfering with ongoing combat operations. Moreover, the timing of the stripe application would reveal that an invasion was imminent. Every Allied preparation in occupied Europe was closely monitored by enemy spies, and a sudden wave of repainted planes would serve as an unmistakable warning sign. Leigh-Mallory made another crucial decision. The painting wouldn't commence until the very last moment before D-Day. Once the directive was given, execution would proceed swiftly within hours rather than days. Both security and speed were paramount. On June 1, 1944, a small-scale test flight took place. A few aircraft, already marked with invasion stripes, flew over the assembled Operation Overlord fleet to acclimate ship crews to the new visual identifiers. Sailors and gunners observed the passing of the striped plane overhead. They had been informed that these markings signified friendly planes. Any aircraft lacking such stripes was to be regarded as hostile. The rule was straightforward. If it wasn't striped, shoot it down. The black and white pattern stood out vividly against the sky, making it more noticeable than standard roundels and eliminating any possibility of confusion. The RAF had previously learned with Typhoons that simple visual markings, when properly designed, could be more effective than complex electronic systems. However, this test involved only a few aircraft, and the real challenge was yet to come. Initially scheduled for June 5th by Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower, D-Day was postponed due to weather conditions until June 6th. This delay provided ground crews with an additional critical day, but also meant that time was running out for painting. On the evening of June 3, 1944, official orders were finally issued. All troop carrier units were instructed to paint invasion stripes immediately. No delays, no postponements. Every C-47 transport and glider tug involved in dropping paratroopers or towing gliders on D-Day needed to be painted that night. Paratroopers were scheduled to make their jump shortly after midnight on June 6th, but prior to that, the planes had to be painted before departure. Ground crews were given around 48 hours to finish this task. On June 4th, orders were issued to all fighter and bomber squadrons across Britain, including every P-51 Mustang, P-47 Thunderbolt, P-38 Lightning, Spitfire Typhoon, Tempest, B-26 Marauder, A-26 Invader, Mosquito photo reconnaissance aircraft, and air rescue planes, thousands of them in total. The magnitude of the undertaking had never been seen before. It was a challenge that no one had ever attempted on such a scale. Secretly stockpiled paint supplies were now distributed to squad. This included 5-gallon containers of black and white paint, an assortment of brushes, rollers for large surfaces, and masking tape to safeguard roundels and serial numbers. Detailed written instructions outlined stripe width and placement, along with diagrams demonstrating proper application methods. There were also warnings emphasizing the importance of keeping national markings visible. The supplies arrived in trucks that drove through the night with headlights concealed, following routes memorized during daylight hours. As soon as they reached their destinations, ground crews began the arduous task of painting thousands of aircraft immediately. These same workers who had spent the entire day maintaining planes, loading ammunition, and fueling tanks returned to the flight lines for another round of work that night. This time, however, instead of tools, they carried paint. Portable lighting was set up around each plane while ground crews measured and marked with chalk before applying masking tape along designated lines. The physical labor required was extremely demanding, as every aircraft needed gallons of paint to complete its new appearance. Each wing required coverage from its leading edge to its trailing edge, both top and bottom surfaces. The fuselage needed complete wrapping, starting from the cockpit all the way back to the tail section. The paint had to be applied thickly enough to ensure visibility, but not so much that it added unnecessary weight. They painted through the night, enduring darkness, cold temperatures, and strong winds. Despite their aching arms and screaming backs, they continued to work until the task was complete. At RAF Lynham in Suffolk, ground crews spent the entire night of June 4th painting P-51 Mustangs belonging to the 375th Fighter Group. Captain Clarence Anderson, known by his call sign Bud, was a seasoned pilot with months of combat experience under his belt. When he approached his aircraft on the morning of June 5th, he stood in stunned amazement. His Mustang's wings and fuselage were covered with alternating bands of white and black stripes, each band being 18 inches wide. The markings were so prominent that Anderson couldn't believe how large they appeared. These stripes dominated the overall look of the aircraft, making every other marking seem unimportant in comparison. He had been informed that ground crews would paint special markings overnight, but had anticipated something more subtle. Instead, what he saw was an incredibly bold and noticeable pattern, Across Britain, this scene played out at hundreds of airfields as pilots arrived for their dawn briefings to find their aircraft similarly transformed. The standard camouflage patterns were disrupted by stark black and white stripes. Some of these paint jobs were meticulously executed, while others appeared rushed and crude. The ground crews labored under severe time constraints, often completing their tasks within mere hours. In several instances, aircraft took off on D-Day with wet paint still drying. The logistics involved in this operation were staggering. Thousands of gallons of paint were used in less than 48 hours. Post-war reports suggested that most of the available black and white paint supplies in Britain had been depleted. Even if not literally true, this assertion conveyed the immense scale of the undertaking. Each airfield required substantial stockpiles of paint, and every squadron needed manpower around the clock to keep up with the demands. Some squadrons found themselves short on paint and resorted to improvisation, utilizing whatever black and white hues they could find, whether it was gloss or flat paint. A weather delay that postponed D-Day from June 5th to June 6th turned out to be crucial, providing ground crews with an extra day to prepare. Squadrons that had initially been behind schedule managed to complete their painting in time. Aircraft that might have flown with incomplete markings instead carried full coverage. This delay, which likely frustrated many commanders, probably saved numerous planes from being shot down by friendly forces. At midnight on June 6, 1944, Operation Neptune, the aerial part of Operation Overlord, commenced. Over 23,000 Allied airborne troops boarded transport aircraft and gliders at airfields throughout southern England. This included 8 222 planes transporting paratroopers destined for Normandy and hundreds more towing gliders filled with infantry, artillery, jeeps, and supplies, all marked with invasion stripes. These distinctive patterns were easily recognizable as they flew over the massive fleet gathering in the English Channel. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions would jump first to secure the western flank of the invasion, while the British 6th Airborne Division was tasked with securing the eastern flank. The paratrooper drops began at midnight, 5.5 hours before the amphibious landings commenced. The aircraft had to navigate over the most heavily fortified fleet ever assembled, consisting of 6,000 ships manned by tens of thousands of anti-aircraft gunners who had been on high alert for days. As they watched the airborne forces pass overhead, naval crews from the Allied naval force saw the clear black and white patterns against the night sky. Despite the darkness and any clouds present, the contrast was evident. Even in moments of extreme tension, with fingers near triggers, the order to hold fire was strictly enforced across the fleet. In contrast to Sicily's chaos and bloodshed, strict protocols were upheld this time around. Naval commanders maintained rigorous fire control measures. Crew members adhered meticulously to their directives. Invasion stripes proved highly effective during their inaugural combat deployment. At dawn, amphibious units approached the designated beaches, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, while a sky full of aircraft provided support. Targeted coasted bunkers and artillery emplacements threatened the fort. Reconnaissance planes captured detailed imagery of the assault for strategic analysis. All aircraft bore distinctive invasion stripes that clearly identified them as part of the Allied forces. The German Luftwaffe's response was surprisingly feeble. Prior to D-Day, many fighters stationed in France had been redeployed to Germany to combat the Allied bombing campaigns. By June 6, 1944, intelligence suggested that the Germans expected over 5,000 aircraft for defensive operations, but were left with just 319 operational planes against nearly 13,000 Allied aircraft. On D-Day alone, for every sortie flown by the Luftwaffe, 37 Allied sorties took place. Just a dozen German fighter bombers managed to reach the invasion area. 10 of these jettisoned their bombs prematurely and retreated hastily. Among them, 2 pilots stood out, Joseph Pips Priller, an ace pilot, and his wingman, Heinz Waddick. According to popular lore, both had been partying late into the night before. They conducted a single strafing run over the beaches, enduring intense anti-aircraft fire, then vanished from sight. German troops on the ground later quipped sarcastically, "If you see gray planes, they're American, if black planes, British, and if no planes at all, they must be German." This joke reflected the stark reality: Allied air superiority was virtually unchallenged. Yet, these stripes faced the very danger that planners had feared most: friendly fire from confused, exhausted, and anxious gunners who reacted instinctively without questioning their actions first. This threat had already resulted in 81 casualties during the Sicily operation, but was now mitigated effectively. As D-Day progressed, incidents of friendly fire involving aircraft were mercifully rare. The basic paint scheme achieved what advanced electronic systems could not. While some doubted the necessity of these stripes, given the overwhelming air dominance by Allied forces and minimal German presence, those who had witnessed Sicily's challenges vehemently disagreed. To them, the stripes served as crucial protection against potential confusion, rather than a mere safeguard against enemy deception. They were safeguards against human error, designed specifically to prevent Allied forces from mistakenly engaging each other. This risk did not diminish simply because the Luftwaffe was weakened. Additionally, these markings played a crucial psychological role. When soldiers pinned down on the beaches saw striped aircraft flying overhead, they knew immediately that help was nearby and unmistakably friendly. This sight provided immense reassurance to those under fire. It underscored the dominance of Allied air power in the battlefield environment, reinforcing the message that they were not alone. For pilots, these markings offered a significant boost in confidence. As they flew low over invasion beaches or engaged German positions with strafing runs and attacks on coastal defenses, their awareness that friendly forces would recognize them reduced concerns about friendly fire incidents. This psychological assurance translated into more efficient combat operations. The effectiveness of the invasion stripes was such that initial plans were to keep them in place indefinitely. For nearly a month following D-Day, all aircraft retained these markings without change. However, by mid-July, an issue arose. The prominent placement of stripes on upper wings and fuselages made the planes highly conspicuous from above. Consequently, on July 7, 1944, orders were issued to remove the top wing and fuselage stripes. While the undersides of the planes still required the distinctive markings, the upper surfaces could be repainted with standard camouflage patterns. By December 1944, the tactical landscape had shifted dramatically. Allied forces had successfully broken out of Normandy and were now moving deeper into France on their way to Germany. The heavy concentration of aircraft over a narrow beachhead was no longer a feature of the battlefield. Consequently, the risk of friendly fire incidents had significantly diminished. On December 27, 1944, directives were issued to eliminate all invasion stripes from Allied aircraft. This allowed planes to revert to their standard markings, while those distinctive black and white bands remained etched in history as powerful symbols of a massive operation. D-Day photographs featuring the unmistakable markings of Allied aircraft became iconic representations of the invasion. These stripes not only conveyed the sheer scale of the operation, but also underscored the need for precise coordination to deploy an unprecedented 13,000 aircraft over the beaches. Additionally, they highlighted how even the largest military endeavor relies on straightforward solutions to address complex challenges. Statistical data confirmed the system's efficacy. On D-Day, 14 70-74 sorties were flown by 11.90 Allied aircraft, resulting in just 107 losses, a loss rate of less than 1%. Most of these losses were attributed to German anti-aircraft fire or mechanical issues, rather than friendly fire incidents. The difference with Sicily was striking. Out of 44 aircraft involved, 23 were shot down by Allied gunfire, resulting in a loss rate of 16% due to friendly fire alone. Historians later determined that invasion strikes likely saved around 500 aircraft from being mistakenly targeted during June 1944. Each of these planes carried crew members and represented millions of dollars worth of equipment, contributing significantly to air superiority over the beaches. The use of stripes not only protected aircraft, but also safeguarded lives, maintained combat readiness, and ensured that Allied air power could be deployed effectively where needed most. The psychological impact on German forces was profound. Prisoners taken after D-Day frequently reported feeling overwhelmed by the constant presence of Allied aircraft. They described a sky filled with endless waves of planes conducting non-stop attacks without any respite. The sight of thousands of striped aircraft reinforced the perception that Germany faced an adversary with limitless resources. One captured German officer near Caen in late June recounted watching the invasion from within a concrete bunker for 3 hours after dawn, during which there was not a single moment when he could not see Allied planes overhead. These formations consisted of 30 to 50 aircraft painted with black and white stripes, clearly identifiable as friendly units but lethal to their opponents. At that point, the officer believed Germany had lost the war. The effectiveness of invasion stripes influenced military planning for decades thereafter. United Nations forces employed similar markings during major operations, while British and French aircraft used black and yellow stripes in the 1956 Suez Crisis. The basic principle remained unchanged. Simple visual identifiers applied consistently could prevent friendly fire more effectively than advanced technology. While modern military forces now rely on sophisticated electronic identification systems, such as radar, satellite communications, and IFF, identification friend or foe, technologies capable of tracking thousands of aircraft simultaneously, the fundamental challenge persists in the chaos of combat. When systems malfunction or communication channels deteriorate, individuals must make rapid identification decisions. The idea of addressing this issue through visual markings and paint persists to this day. On 1985, a reunion for surviving veterans of the D-Day Normandy invasion took place in France, marking 41 years since that historic event. Among those who attended were pilots who had flown aircraft adorned with stripes during the assault on the beaches. Paratroopers shared their experiences of jumping from planes that managed to avoid enemy fire due to the clear identification provided by the stripes. One veteran, a former anti-aircraft gunner stationed aboard a destroyer, recalled his memories of D-Day. He had been at his post since midnight and watched as waves of transport aircraft passed overhead in the darkness. Despite the challenging visibility conditions, he could still discern the black and white stripes on the planes. His hand was poised to release fire, guided by strict orders. If the planes were not marked appropriately, he would have opened fire, potentially killing American paratroopers. However, due to the conspicuous markings, he maintained his restraint and did not pull the trigger. The veteran succinctly stated that those stripes saved lives. He added, "They preserved mine as well." For had he fired upon friendly aircraft by mistake, he would have been unable to bear the guilt of taking American lives. The tale of the invasion stripes serves as a reminder of how lessons learned from past failures can lead to significant improvements in operational safety and effectiveness. The tragedy that unfolded over Sicily in July 1943 was not unavoidable. It could have been prevented with better identification systems. This outcome stemmed from insufficient planning, inadequate training, and communication breakdowns. However, their sacrifice was not in vain. The subsequent investigation pinpointed specific problems. Solutions were devised, procedures revised, technology enhanced, and improvements implemented across the board. Among the changes introduced were the invasion stripes, which became a prominent symbol of transformation. Training regimens were broadened, communication protocols standardized, IFF systems upgraded, and emphasis placed on fire discipline at all levels. The invasion stripes served as a tangible representation of the commitment to prevent another Sicily scenario. This pledge was upheld. Major General Matthew Ridgway, who had witnessed his paratroopers perish over Sicily, lived to see the successful Normandy invasion with fewer casualties. In his memoirs written years later, he reflected on that tragic July night in 1943, expressing regret for the avoidable loss of life. Yet once it occurred, there was a choice: accept it as an inevitable wartime tragedy or learn from it. We chose to identify and address the flaws. We had the ability to address the issues and prevent their recurrence. We opted instead to focus on learning from our mistakes and implementing solutions. One such fix involved introducing invasion stripes, which were not a flawless remedy but significantly reduced instances of friendly fire. While they didn't eliminate every case, they played a crucial role in the success of what became the largest military operation ever undertaken. The ground crew tasked with applying these distinctive markings on June 3 and 4, 1944, were unaware that their work would become historic. They simply followed directives, mixing paints and meticulously painting aircraft through the night under immense time constraints. The process was arduous and physically challenging, leaving many to question its necessity. In contrast, the pilots who flew these marked planes on D-Day had first-hand experience of the stripes' effectiveness. Captain Bud Anderson, initially taken aback by their audacity, piloted his striped P-5-1 Mustang for an extended mission over the Normandy beaches. Throughout this period, not a single ship fired upon him. He mentioned in a post-war interview that the stripes worked effectively. I realized their efficacy when flying over enemy fleets without being targeted. Those markings were crucial to my survival, and countless other pilots shared similar experiences. Thousands of aircrew members owed their lives to ground crews who painted those distinctive patterns, often deemed excessive at first glance. The impact of these stripes permeated every aspect of the operation. The invasion stripes also held a deeper meaning. They embodied the immense organizational prowess that led to victory in World War II. Coordinating thousands of aircraft and supplying hundreds of gallons of paint across numerous airfields simultaneously demonstrated the capability to execute plans swiftly and efficiently, touching every squadron in Britain within 48 hours while maintaining strict security despite involving thousands of people. Human beings under stress cannot reliably identify aircraft by silhouette alone. Providing them with a distinctive pattern that stands out solves this issue. Embracing simple solutions when appropriate characterized the Allied approach throughout the war. Not all problems required cutting-edge technology. Sometimes, the best solution was as basic as paint and brushes. Effectiveness often mattered more than elegance, and in some cases, saving lives meant painting stripes on thousands of planes within 48 hours. The impact of the invasion stripes extends far beyond their tactical achievements. They highlighted the significance of minor details in even the most extensive military operations, underscored the critical importance of inter-service communication, and emphasized the necessity of learning from past errors to prevent future catastrophes. Simple solutions, when effectively implemented, can save hundreds of lives. These insights remain pertinent decades after the stripes were retired. In June 1944, as Allied forces secured a foothold in Normandy and thousands of aircraft adorned with black and white stripes flew overhead during the largest invasion in history, Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Tucker was present. He had survived the disaster over Sicily, witnessed his comrades fall victim to friendly fire, and vowed that such tragedy would never repeat itself. Despite not writing memoirs or giving speeches about the invasion stripes, he privately expressed a quiet sense of fulfillment with fellow officers. The lessons from Sicily had been absorbed. The bloodshed had yielded crucial knowledge which was then put into practice. The narrative surrounding why American and British pilots began painting stripes on their aircraft wings is more concerned with the human cost of learning in war rather than technological advancements or tactical strategies. It is a story about honoring those who paid with their lives to acquire vital information, ensuring that these sacrifices were not in vain, and the resolve to prevent history from repeating itself. 81 men perished over Sicily due to friendly fire incidents by Allied forces, a number which should have been zero. The fact that it was not underscores a significant failure. However, the reaction to that failure, a dedicated effort to identify and rectify the issues, represented more than just success. It symbolized a dedication to continuous learning and improvement, as well as a commitment to safeguarding lives entrusted to military leadership. The implementation of invasion stripes in June 1944 prevented around 500 aircraft from being shot down by friendly fire. Each saved plane carried a crew comprising pilots, navigators, gunners, and maintenance personnel, thereby preserving hundreds of lives. The 81 individuals who perished over Sicily made it possible for thousands to survive in Normandy. Their sacrifice was not in vain. Instead, it led to the creation of an effective system. When the last invasion stripes were removed in December 1944 and aircraft returned to their standard markings, when the contrasting black and white paint faded into memory, the lessons remained etched in history. These principles, such as finding simple solutions for complex problems, learning from failures, and prioritizing the safety of one's own forces while engaging with the enemy, are not unique to invasion stripes, but are fundamental military tenets that transcend this particular practice. The introduction of these stripes exemplified how systematic problem-solving can save lives on a large scale when the military is committed to addressing issues rather than tolerating casualties. The ground crews responsible for painting thousands of aircraft within 48 hours did not receive recognition or medals, and their names are rarely mentioned in history books. Working through sleepless nights mixing paint and meticulously applying it while adhering to strict measurements under extreme time pressure, these individuals faced immense stress and exhaustion. Despite facing challenges, they achieved their goals. Their accomplishments ensured that pilots could continue flying, crews stayed safe, and missions were completed successfully. The invasion stripes used on D-Day have become one of the most recognizable symbols associated with World War II. Images and photographs capturing these distinctive markings are widely available. Striped aircraft can be seen in various museums around the world, while enthusiasts often build models showcasing them. Historians frequently analyze their importance. However, the real significance of those basic black and white bands does not lie solely in their visual appeal. Instead, it is rooted in the lives they protected, the lessons they imparted, and the evidence they provided that learning from past tragedies can prevent future ones. The reason pilots painted stripes on their wings was not merely for identification or tactical benefits, but because 81 men lost their lives over Sicily, and those deaths necessitated a meaningful response. These stripes offered purpose to those losses. The markings transformed tragedy into prevention and turned what could have been failure into success. By doing so, they saved approximately 500 aircraft and countless lives. They demonstrated that sometimes the difference between disaster and victory hinges on something as simple as black paint, white paint, and an unwavering commitment to learn from previous missteps.